Welcome to Right on Track, a songwriting podcast. Thanks to Tone for tuning in. I'm Demi Michelle Schwartz, and I'm thrilled you're joining me on my songwriting journey. So kick back and relax, don't fall flat, and remember, stay right on track. Hello everyone, welcome back to Right on Track. I'm so excited because I have a very special guest on the show with me today, Allison Leah. Hey Allison.
Hey, how are you doing?
I'm fantastic, how are you?
Good, thanks for having me.
Of course, I cannot wait to dive into this conversation we're having today because you came up with an incredible topic, which is talking about differentiating your sound sonically and lyrically between a first release and a second project. And I'm very, very excited for this. But before we dive into that, can you share a little bit with the listeners about yourself and your songwriting journey so far?
Yeah, I am a folk pop artist originally from New York, but now based in Nashville, Tennessee. I moved here about a year and a half ago now. And with it, I've changed some of my style and been working on a new EP to release this coming spring. So I'm really excited.
I'm so excited for you. That's awesome.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm really thrilled. It's been such a whirlwind of the last year and a half. So I'm really excited to have something to show for, the time that I've spent kind of introspective about all of my life.
Literally same. Yeah, I totally feel. I'm really excited for my music coming next year as well. So let's dive right into this. You found an awesome quote by John Cage. So would you like to read that?
Yes, it reads, I can't understand why people are frightened of new ideas. I'm frightened of the old ones.
This is amazing. What does this mean to you?
I immediately kind of saw this quote and was like, yeah, that really captures it. Because I think like when you have a product and like when you have art that you're creating, you can never really replicate it. It's kind of why the classics are the classics. And so that I kind of have been taking this mentality into creating a new project of as much as I love my old EP and as much as I love the music that I've been writing, it's important to me to make sure that I'm staying fresh, both for myself and for my listeners.
Exactly, yeah. And I think there's also an element of growth here. If you keep doing the same thing over and over again, you're not going to grow and you're not going to deliver something new and fresh and unique. And so I really think it's important to, yes, it's okay to always reflect back on those old times and old ways because those are our roots and we'll always have those. But I think there's something to be said about being open to exploring and pushing your own boundaries and also the boundaries of the music industry as well to continue to put out new material that is you and from your heart, but also something new as well.
Oh, 100%. You couldn't have said it better myself.
So I want to talk first about when we got started because it all starts with our first project and truly our roots from the very beginning. So what style of music did you really take a dive into? I know you said folk pop. So that is what you started with when you started songwriting for the first time?
Well, I think I originally started just the best way to kind of capture it is just by saying like singer songwriter, because I think that I was inspired by a lot of other singer songwriters. But when I wrote my first album, I wasn't really focusing on the genre of it. I actually had very very few ideas about production while I was writing the songs to begin with. So I was just kind of writing music that I felt inspired to write and music that I thought other people could relate to, and music that helped me. And I wrote a lot of that album in college too before I was out in the world, trying to do the thing and become a musician. And so I think with the second EP that I've been recording, it's kind of naturally I've thought about production while I've been recording the music because I've already been through it. And at that point, I've known that I have to kind of know the sound and style that I want from it while I'm writing the song. So I think naturally I started off pretty singer songwriter indie style. People called it indie folk because it was very folk driven. And I think now I'm starting with the next EP, I'm adding more of a pop commercial sound into it.
That's awesome. You brought up so many incredible points I want to dive deeper into. So first I want to touch on you brought up that, you kind of wrote from an inspiration standpoint, not necessarily thinking production and genre. And I think that's awesome, especially when you're starting because you always want to write from a place of truth. And that doesn't matter when it comes to the genre. And so I think starting from that point is so important because now moving forward, you're still doing that, but you're also being more aware of what is this going to sound like when I get into production. But also, I think, like for me, I started off as super contemporary pop because that's what I listened to growing
Really?
up. Yeah, literally only pop. Like if you listen to Dear Diary, which is my album, it's coming out soon. As we're recording this, it's coming out literally in a week, but this episode will be out after
I'm
the
so
album
excited
releases.
to hear it.
Thanks. Yeah. So that's mostly contemporary pop. And so I think another thing is like when we're first starting, we tend to do what we know because we're so new at it. We don't really want to take risks. And so I think for me starting out, it was so much easier to be locked into contemporary pop. But like like you're starting to recognize, hey, like I started, indie folk, but now I'm going more pop. And me, I'm definitely going more country. And I think without us starting off with our roots and really taking a step back and saying, okay, this is what I know and this is what I want to put out. Without that, we wouldn't be able to build off of it. So I think it's really important to start from somewhere.
Yeah. But I'm so curious because I think part of my experience too is that like I was writing these songs on a guitar because that's what I learned. And so, when I was starting out and I wanted to write music, it was kind of just stemming from guitar. So when I went into the studio, I had a guitar. And so it was never like, it was never, not, I don't want to say an option because if I wanted it to be an option, it could have been. But I guess it's just I was like, okay, well, what's the next logical step after you record a guitar and vocal? Then you add a bass. So I think it's interesting. I wonder how were you able to just immediately start creating contemporary pop music?
Yeah, that's actually an interesting question because I did too write a lot on guitar. And that's why it's so interesting because when I would play my songs for people, they would say, oh, that sounds super country. And in my head, I have this really clear vision of it being contemporary pop. So it's really
Wow.
interesting now that I'm naturally going more country. But when I went to the studio, I found a producer who loves doing pop music, and it took me a while to find a good producer, to be honest. But once I found one that really let me be hands on, when I went to the studio, I showed my producer a very stripped demo, guitar vocal, piano vocal, and gave him references of contemporary pop songs, and so we were able to do that. But, I honestly wasn't very open to country when I started because I never really embraced the genre until a couple years ago. And so that wasn't really an option for me at the time. But it's super interesting reflecting back now, seeing how people did view my music as more country, lyrically specifically. But now I'm actually going that direction.
I love learning about that because that is so it's lovely hearing about like all of the differences within our stories, and how we end up where we go. And it's funny that you were resistant to country at first, and now you're like, I think it's what I'm naturally writing.
Yeah. So we both have definitely seen evolution with our styles. So what was most challenging making that transition from your first project to the one you're producing now?
Yeah, I think that the hardest part for me was like creating a sonic idea and sticking with it. Because I naturally, like I said, I love folk music. One day I want to make a whole folk record. I want to release an acoustic EP. I want to write more pop music and make like a full on commercial pop record. And I think like having all of these interests really keep me motivated. But I've been writing all of them at once. I over quarantine especially, I would go from writing with my friend and doing like a pop production to it to like writing a folk song in my bedroom the next day. And I think it's really important to me to have some sort of cohesive thread throughout an album. But I think finding what that thread was going to be was a challenge. I ended up writing a lot of music before I picked the 6 or 7 songs that are going to make the EP.
That's so interesting because I had a very similar experience. Like when I was wrapping
Really?
up, yeah, when I was wrapping up recording Dear Diary, That's when COVID hit. And so, the studio was closed. I was on lockdown. And during lockdown is when I started going more country, but my album wasn't done yet. And so it's really weird because, like, I was going to the studio and recording these pop songs when my brain was like, I just want to do country. And so I think the biggest challenge for me was, like, making sure I keep my album consistent sonically, like you were saying. I mean, I guess you could mix genres, but like I think it's important for the album to have an overall, sound and specific with genre. And so I think, like, even when I was writing and recording my new country music, I recorded two songs, Will I Ever and Perfectly Imperfect, that were pop, that I ended up adding to the album because I feel like as independent artists too, like you were saying, it's hard to be consistent sometimes because you have these different interests. But I think as independent artists, we have the freedom to explore, but at the same time, like, if we're looking to get a record deal or something, it's important to know your genre and really nail down a style. So I think you and I are both kind of in the area of still exploration, which is definitely okay. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. And I think we need this time because once we do all these different things, explore and really figure out who we are as artists, then it's more clear to us and then also more clear to the industry as a whole.
I think I agree, but I also think that like I don't see myself as somebody that's like ever going to stop exploring sonic ideas. And I don't know, I think that like something that I love so much about, I mean, like Taylor Swift, for example, is like she changes up her genres all the time. And I love all of her records. And so I think that that's something that I've considered of like while I'm still like in the process of growing and like building up, whether it's like building up my catalog of music. I like having all of these different pieces of myself, just because it's like I'm ever changing, and it's almost like a time capsule, you know?
Yeah, exactly. No, I completely agree with you. Like you brought up Taylor, I completely agree. And I think, for me doing pop and country, she's a great example of it's okay to do both. And at the same time, I feel like if somebody in the industry is going to believe in you enough to support you, they should be able to embrace who you are and all that you do. And I think that's one thing that, I mean, for me specifically, like if somebody would even think about signing me or something, I would never give up my creativity and, turn down ever doing pop or something again just because they want me to do something else. Like, I think it's important to always hold on to, your passion and what you want to do. But I also think, like you said, it kind of being like a time capsule. I completely agree because we're always growing and we're always learning. And I think it's so cool to like look back on earlier music that we've done and see like, oh, this is what I did then, but I'm changing and this is my style now. This is my lyrical, concepts now. I think it's really cool to have that ability to look back on that.
I totally agree. I think that's one of my favorite parts.
So we talked a little bit about style and, going back and forth between genres, but have you seen a shift in your music lyrically?
Yeah, yeah, totally. I actually think that's one of the biggest changes between my old record and my new record. Um, my debut EP, Fly Home, is a lot about firsts, like first love, first heartbreak, first time moving away. And so this record is going to be a natural step past that. And so I've written actually about some topics that I've never written. I've written a lot more in depth lyrically about certain topics like love and loss, and really made those moments, like made the quieter moments quieter and the climactic moments more climactic. And I even have a couple like I have a couple like sassy songs, a pretty sarcastic song, and I feel like those are all lyrical palettes that I hadn't really ever explored before. And it's much more autobiographical than my first EP. I think I wrote my first EP a lot about me and my experiences, but it was also more macro level about the world and some other people's experiences. And this one's very much like, if you listen to this record, you're going to know me very well by the end of it.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I think we're similar in the fact that, first project being focused on, like love and heartbreak and, really discovering yourself. Because that's literally what Dear Diary is, my debut album. But, the difference is, like, my first album is literally like 100% me. That's why it's called Dear Diary. It's literally like diary entries. But like you, like same thing. I am totally going in a more sassy direction with some of my songs, but also I'm starting to write about topics that are more, aside from, love and loss and heartbreak and those kind of things. And I think it's really interesting because I was in such a place where I had to write Dear Diary and I couldn't write anything else. And I think through writing that album, I kind of healed and found self discovery. And so I feel like I opened myself a door to be
I
able to
love
write
that.
empowering songs and more songs with attitude and just something completely different. And I think that's what I'm most excited for, like writing about different things.
Oh, I absolutely love that. I think that that's so that you just hit the nail on the head, or saying like well, I think that it's also like I think that's another huge difference is I also felt that like writing is helpful in processing emotions, like when you go through a lot in life, I was writing songs when I was 14, 15, 16 to make sense of the world and to make sense of myself and my experiences. And so then once you put like your first couple songs out in the world, they usually do revolve around like what you've always used music to help you do. And I've always said that like the way that other musicians music has helped me, it's like my goal with music is to help other people and like have other people relate and use my music as almost like a soundtrack to their own life.
Yeah,
um
exactly.
so that's always been like something in the back of my mind.
Yeah, no, same, totally. I think, the most important thing for me and the most success I think that any songwriter can have is having a listener tell you that they connected to your songs. And I think that's huge, so huge. And I think, you and I are definitely taking this approach of like we've learned from our first projects. We love them. They're still part of us, but I think when you start anything, no matter what you're doing in life, you have to start somewhere. And I think we tend to start in places that are more comfortable and less risky to get a feel for the waters, test the waters. But after that, it's like, okay, I did this album, this project is behind me, this is how I've grown from it, this is what I've learned, and I'm ready to take on something else that's fresh and from a different perspective. And I think as we continue to move down this road and this journey as songwriters and artists, the more we do, and the more we release music, the more we're going to continue to do that. And it's going to be so cool in years to really look back on our first releases and see how far we've come from, the first one to however many we get down the road.
Oh, 100%.
What advice would you give to any songwriter or artist who is struggling to move out of an old style and explore another?
Oh, interesting. I would say pick up a new instrument. Find a new way to write. I think that that actually was something that really shifted my mentality as I started writing to tracks. In that I have a collaborator named Alex Bignata who I've been collaborating with on this next project. And we would start by creating like tracks in his studio. And so like we would just, at one point I think my song What I'm Missing was started from a percussion loop, and then I thought of some background vocals, and I just like laid them down and had it on a loop, and we wrote the song to like literally percussion, synth, and background vocals. And then once the song was written, we added in all the other layers that make it a song. And it really helped me push myself harder to start writing to tracks, because all of a sudden I was writing in new keys that I'd never written in. I was writing to percussion rather than writing to guitar. And I would just advise them to try something that they haven't tried before.
I love that. And that's perfect. Like, I think it's all about exploration and stepping out of your comfort zone. It's like we
Yeah.
were talking about at the beginning. If you keep doing the same thing over and over again, yes, that feels familiar. But if you never try anything new, then you'll never know. And I think I had a similar experience with when I started doing more of my country songs. One of my album songs, which was a single, Find Love, when I initially wrote it, it was very pop, but then during COVID, I rewrote the song and it ended up being more pop country. And I remember,
Oh, wow.
like, for me, one of the biggest things I think that held me back from going country sooner was the fact that I am not good enough at guitar. And I felt like, admitting that I think was a weakness for me. And I was like afraid to like look for a guitar. It's like that was like a serious thing. I was like, I don't really want to stay, like I don't want to do, country because, I'm not good at guitar. And so I stuck with what was easier, contemporary pop, because my producer and I literally did everything pretty much MIDI. And so I think, Find Love was a song I really connected with. And it ended up being more pop country in the end. And I remember like telling my producer, I really want to do this song, but I can play guitar okay, not good enough for a recording. And that's when he brought Luke Wood, my guitarist, into the mix. And he's been my guitarist ever since. And we've been doing a ton of country music. And so I think it's just a point of accepting that you have weaknesses and you're not going to be the best at everything. And it's okay, because when you accept those things, then you can reach out to other people. And when you bring different people into the recording process, it's so awesome, because those songs are, a product of all of you working together. And the more collaboration you have going on, the more unique your music is going to be, because it's all of your perspectives rolled into one.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think that like one of my biggest things in life with music is just surrounding yourself with people that you trust and that people that make you better, than yourself. Because I think that we all have strengths and things to offer, and the more people that we can, and I mean, to an extent, you don't want to get like 300 people on your track, because then it'll, I don't know about that, but but getting people that you trust for sure adds and never subtracts.
100%. Yeah, and I think also, like, just the relationships in general, like, the more people you meet in the music industry, the more experiences you have, that's naturally going to impact your life and how you think about things. And I think from a lyrical standpoint, like, some of the songs I'm writing now, based on some experiences I've had with my collaborators and just the industry as a whole, is shaping me, that I'm writing songs differently from a lyrical perspective and a structural perspective. And so without those experiences, without being an open person, meeting people, not just collaborators, just being open to the world as a whole and really taking it all in, is definitely a way, I think, to grow as well.
Oh, I'm totally agree with you.
So looking ahead, so you're working on this new EP that's going more pop. That's going to be very different than what your listeners are used to from the past. Obviously, your latest singles are starting to signal that shift, but can you share a little bit about your thoughts from being mindful of how listeners will receive music if it's different than the music that you've released prior to the new material?
Yeah, I mean, I think that that was something that was really sticking with me. I mean, we all have critics and we all have people that I mean, look at any artist ever. Like, everyone has like a favorite Beatles album. Some people are gonna like one thing more than the next. And I again like kind of use the Taylor Swift example of everyone has their favorite album, but it doesn't mean that the other album is bad. It just means that it's different, and some things are for others. And I mean, I've had some people already say about my recent single that that they love it and they're excited to hear more, and they really are gravitating to this growth. But I've had other people like say, I kind of wish that it was like your other music, and I don't really like it as much. And honestly, both are totally acceptable to me, because I know that that's shows me grow, that I'm growing and creating something fresh and new, because I'm confident in my own work, and I'm very, very, very proud of this music that I'm creating. And so I think it's important to keep something like, fresh. I think it's important to keep people interested. But on a personal level, it's also really important for me to explore new sounds and styles so that I stay inspired, because I could write, I could create a million, or not a million, but I could create several records that really play off the sound palettes of Fly Home. And I know people like really gravitated to my song Colorado and Fly Home, and I could just have a lot of songs that sound exactly the same, but that wouldn't be fair to Colorado, because Colorado is Colorado because that is the song. And now I can write new songs that stick with people for different reasons. And I think, as I mentioned too, like I definitely am going pop for this record. It doesn't mean that I'm never going to write a folk song again. In fact, I have a lot of folk songs that I'd love to release after this record's done. So I think it's just a matter of keeping people interested. And I always like surprising people.
That's incredible. Absolutely amazing. I love your whole mindset because it's like, oh, this person loved it, but this person said, I wish it was your older sound. And you took that as, okay, that's chill. Like your opinion is your opinion, that's valid. And like it's not like you're taking that criticism of, oh, I wish it was like your older music, like in a bad way. And it's not like in any way affecting your decision. Like that's not making you backpedal and be like, oh wait, maybe I shouldn't do this EP anymore. Like you're totally taking it as a growth perspective, and I love that. And I also think too, like exploring these different styles and taking risks and trying something else, that would just expand your fan base because you'll always have the fans that love your indie folk style music. But now that you're releasing more pop, contemporary pop music, you're going to attract new listeners that love that. And I think that's another thing that I definitely seen with Taylor. She has country fans, she has pop fans, she has like alternative, indie folk kind of fans with Folklore and Evermore. Like she's like all across the board with her music. And I think in a way that's like an awesome marketing strategy because you're just expanding your reach with different styles of music.
Yeah, 100%. And I think honestly, beyond all of that, the reason that everyone gravitates to different, like the reason that I can say, you know what, I'm not really a big fan of insert Taylor Swift album here, but I still love it because I love her songwriting. And so I think that's kind of the common denominator with all of my music that I try and do is like, I try and make sure it's true to my story, true to who I am. And then, so because I know that people are listening to my music, wanting to, whatever. I don't want to like put a label on it because I'm sure people are listening for a multitude of reasons. But I just think that it's as long as I stick true to what my message is and what I'm saying, then if people don't like it, that's fine. If people like it more, that's fine too. Like, and I think that what that says to me about
Keep going.
like what that says to me about someone in the past saying like, I really liked Colorado. I miss the sound that you had with Colorado. To me, that says, awesome. I have a fan of that song. That's so cool. He likes the song Colorado, and maybe one day I'll have another song that he likes. You know?
Exactly. Yeah, that's fantastic. And I love how you brought up the point that the common denominator is that it's you and your songwriting. And I think that's a great kind of point to wind down on here because no matter what style you write, genre, whatever, if you're writing from a place of truth and you're writing from your heart, then that song, all your music, everything will always be you. And no matter what album, single, whatever that listeners are listening to, if you always write from your personal experiences and your truth, they'll always be able to tie that music back to you. So I think that's extremely important.
Yeah, and I mean, I really think that like if right now I'm really inspired and excited about writing pop music, then I think that knowing my audience and saying, wow, this is definitely going to translate to people because I'm excited about it, so they're going to be excited about it. In the end, also comes into play. And I mean, everyone's going to have their opinions, and so I kind of just try, like you were saying about having a mindset of just accepting everything as, you know what, you listen to my music, and that's cool. But I agree. I think that this has been such a wonderful conversation. I love thinking about this, and I think that people will find it really interesting too.
Yeah, they definitely will. This has been absolutely amazing, Allison. Thank you so much for joining me. Before you go, can you share some final thoughts on embracing new styles and, not being afraid to try out new things and not stick to the old?
Yeah, well, it's funny you mentioned that because that's actually what I was going to say is don't be afraid. Like, just if there's something that's inspiring you, then it's inspiring you for a reason. And if there's something, and if you're saying, well, I don't know if I could do this different sound, I think one of the most interesting pieces of advice that I got about this new record is I was asking a friend who's not necessarily a music person. They just, enjoy music as a listener, but they're not in the business or anything. And I was kind of asking, like, is my new sound like too different from my old sound? And she literally was like, I can't even tell a difference. It just sounds like you. And I think that that's so funny because when you're an artist and when you're a musician or even like a really heavy music consumer or a critic, we can get so in our own heads about like, well, there's a synth in this song, and that means that it's going to sound a little more pop contemporary. And I put this like Mellotron? So is it going to be a folk song? Like just the whole thing. And I think that we can get so wrapped up in it. And in the end, it's always just about creating a good song that we're proud of.
Wow. Allison, that was fantastic. I couldn't have said it better myself. Absolutely amazing. Oh, wow. Well, it was absolutely incredible having you on the show. I love this. Can you share with the listeners where they can find you on social and listen to your fabulous music?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. Oh, this has been wonderful. My name's Allison Leah with ALLISONLEAH. And you can find me all of my music on Spotify, Apple Music, iTunes. My latest single is called What I'm Missing. And all of my social media and my website is Allison Leah Music.
Awesome, Allison. Thank you so much again for joining me.
Thank you for having me. This has been wonderful, and I'm really looking forward to your new music.
Oh, thank you. You as well. Absolutely amazing. Listeners, thank you so much for listening to this episode of Right on Track with Allison Leah. And of course, until next time,
Stay right on track.